Hi everybody, it's Ms. V. I hope that you had a great extra long weekend and had some chocolate treats and maybe a great dinner. And I'm really excited to have you all back and to be continuing on our ecosystems unit. Now it is our third or fourth week, give or take, doing distance learning. And I hope that you're now all finding a rhythm that works best for you. I realize that it can be difficult at times. And I just want to remind you that if you need any help or you're having any difficulties, please feel free to reach out to me. I want to make sure that you guys are doing well and that you're getting the help that you need. So please, please, please don't be afraid to send me an email. I'm more than happy to help. So last week we talked about food webs and food web interactions, as well as limiting factors. So you should now be comfortable with those two concepts. If not, please feel free to go back in last week's notes and take a look or send me an email so that we can make sure that those concepts are things that you're comfortable with. And today we are going to be moving on and talking about carrying capacity. Now, carrying capacity is the size of a population that can be supported indefinitely by the resources of a given ecosystem. No additional individuals can be supported, at least not for long. Now, what I think of when I first hear about carrying capacity is, how much I personally can carry. Okay, what is my cap? Now, some of you may have also experienced this, especially if you work at places like Sobeys or Superstore. But I am one of those annoying customers that always forgets their reusable bags. And I refuse to buy a plastic bag that I'm only going to use once. So I will usually try and carry everything out of the store in my arms, right? I have to know what my own carrying capacity is, because if I buy too much, it's all going to fall out of my arms, right? It's kind of like this idea of no additional individuals can be supported. No extra grocery items can be supported because I'm going to drop them. It's kind of that same idea. So just like how my arms can only carry so much, the earth can only support so many animals or organisms in it. Okay? We only have so many resources to have enough food and shelter and water to support us. So anything above that level, and it's going to get quote unquote dropped out of my arms. Okay. Oh, I also want to remind you, if this is something that you are struggling with, please send an email to me, but also try and watch this video. It's made by a YouTuber who makes a lot of educational hunting videos, and he very clearly goes over carrying capacity and has a lot of good visuals that will help you to understand. Okay. So when a population is maintained at its carrying capacity, the size of the population remains in balance. The number of individuals added is in balance with the number that leave or die. So imagine we have a field of corn and that it can support 50 deer. That means that 50 deer will have enough food and shelter and water to live there happily, and that is my carrying capacity, okay? Now, if those deer breed over the fall or the spring and have, let's say, 12 babies, that is now 12 more mouths that have to feed off of that land. Now, in order for my carrying capacity to stay in balance, that means that 12 other deer are either going to have to leave the area or die off in order for that balance to be maintained and for enough food to go around. When one of the necessary resources is being used at a rate that exceeds the carrying capacity of an ecosystem, the population will eventually be reduced in size until it is once again imbalanced with the available resources in its ecosystem. So say I had that 50 deer in my cornfield and I had 12 babies. If none of the deer died or none of the deer left, I now have 62 deer and only enough corn to feed 50 of them. So that means that naturally, about 12 of them are going to starve off and are going to have to leave the ecosystem. So it's naturally going to want to keep itself in balance, and it's going to reduce that population size until it gets back to 50. Now, we've seen carrying capacity happen in a variety of different populations over the years. In the 1800s, the fur trade led to a drastic reduction in northern fur seal populations because we were now using that seal fur in the fur trade. This decline prompted the first international treaty ever designed to conserve wildlife in 1911. That's a very important thing that we're starting to protect these populations and trying to make sure that these carrying capacities and these populations were kept in balance. So here is a graph showing us what happened to our northern seals after that population went down. When we started hunting their population in 1911, around here, their population was down to about 1,000 breeding males left in the population. And after that treaty was placed, saying that these seals were no longer allowed to be hunted, over a span of about 20 years, we saw a drastic exponential growth in their population. Remember, this is a very, very rapid growth, and you can tell from the J curve in my graph. Right? We should remember that from our previous notes. So this is an exponential growth. And then suddenly we see that leveling off at about 9,000 male individuals. So why would it level off? Why can't it just keep growing and growing and growing? Well, that's because that environment can only sustain so many males, right? We have a carrying capacity. So this means that the carrying capacity of that harbor or that area is about 9,000 males. So if any more are made after that, right, so many are going to have to either move to another area or die off, and that way this is how much resources are available and are able to sustain our population of male seals. Now, sometimes in science, wildlife biologists and park managers, they need to know the carrying capacities of a population that they're studying or they're managing. Now, if you are a hunter, right, we're only allowed to hunt a certain number of deer every year. And that is a number that is calculated by looking at the carrying capacity of that area. We don't want to overhunt them because then there won't be enough for the next year. So measuring these animals can be a little interesting. This is something that I actually did last summer in Churchill, and it's actually a very fun thing. However, it can be very cold and very messy. So there's two options you can have. You can either count them directly. I can make someone go in the forest and count every single deer that they see. Or how about what if I say a Canadian goose, right? You can realize that that's not going to be fun, especially if I send you to the Mennonite Heritage Village. There's a lot of geese there. Or you can do this indirectly by estimating, which is a little bit nicer. It won't give us as good of a number. However, it's something that we can still work with. Okay, so to estimate a population, right, populations of white-tailed deer are usually estimated through a method called pellet group counting. And this involves counting piles of pellets or feces after the winter months. So this is something that I did when I was in Churchill. However, I did it for elk. So I released the other picture. Yeah, sorry. So what we did, this is my friend Chloe here, and we were hiking out about 20 kilometers a day to find our satellite little pigs and putting a 1 meter radius string and counting the amount of pellets that were in that range. So by doing that, you're able to count an average of pellets within the area and then estimate, okay, well, I know that an elk, poops 300 pellets a day, and you can guesstimate how many elk you have living in your area. It's a lot easier than trying to count every single elk. Okay. The previous picture right here, this is another method that some people will use. This is my friend Sean, and he is actually studying polar bear behavior right now, and he wanted to see how many polar bears were in a particular area, so he started setting up some trail cameras. You can see Chloe over here just laying down on the job. But this is a method that is used today, and it is a little messy, but it was also a lot of fun. Okay, so the populations of most species are regulated by carrying capacity. That is the main thing I want you to take away from this. the number of animals in an ecosystem is limited by that carrying capacity. Okay? Now, if you think about humans, there's a lot of us, and it makes you wonder what our carrying capacity is in the world. Okay? The intellectual abilities of humans have allowed us to increase the carrying capacity of our planet for our population. If you think about how many humans lived back in the 1600s compared to how many live here now, there's been a drastic increase. You could say there's been lots of exponential growth. Okay? By improving the public health system, education, agriculture, and medicine and technology, we have increased the carrying capacity of humans. Right? We now have a lot of more technology for harvesting and allowing us to maximize the amount of food that we are able to make off a certain crop. We now have doctors and medicines that allow us to live longer. And you also have education systems that allow us to educate the public on these different things and to allow us to use our resources more wisely. These are all things that have helped to increase our carrying capacity and allow more humans to live on the earth than what previously would have been able to exist. Okay? But for this to continue, for humans to continue to live at such high population numbers, we have to use the ecosystems we live in and the resources that we use in a sustainable way. It's very important that we start thinking about how we use our everyday materials and how we can use them more wisely. So sustainable use of a resource is use that does not cause long-term depletion of the resources. Okay? Sustainable use of a resource allows the resources to meet the needs of the present and future generations. So practices like clear-cutting forests, those are things that are going to be depleting for a very long time. That we're not going to have a forest grow back in a year. It's going to take over 100 years for that forest to grow back. So we need to start thinking about practices that are going to be more sustainable in order to sustain this large population that we have now. Okay? Altering an ecosystem so that more energy and resources can be consumed is only one way to increase the carrying capacity of the ecosystem. Okay, so our farming technology and our medical innovations, those are going to help. But the second way to increase carrying capacity involves altering behavior rather than just the ecosystem itself. Instead of thinking about how many more crops you can grow off of that land, we also need to change our behavior in how we use those crops and making sure that we use them as efficiently and as wholesomely as possible. So I'm sure many of you have heard of an ecological footprint before, and this is something that can really help you be aware of how sustainably you live and what ways you can help to improve that. So an ecological footprint is just a measure of the impact a human, individual, or population has on the environment. A person's ecological footprint is calculated by using your energy consumption, your land use, and your waste production. So if you're someone that has a very small piece of land and maybe uses entirely solar energy and doesn't produce a lot of garbage, you are probably going to have a fairly good sized ecological footprint. If you're someone that produces lots of garbage and maybe uses a lot of energy in their day, you may want to look at ways to reduce it. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so the average person in developed countries, including Canada, have one of the largest ecological footprints in the world. We have lots of access to energy and resources, and because of that, we tend to have larger footprints. So ecological footprints this large in a world that has limited resources and is dependent on non-renewable fossil fuels is likely to be unsustainable. So we have to start thinking about how we use energy and what we can do to reduce this footprint. It's important to embrace the principles of sustainability, so using the Earth's land and water at levels that can continue forever. Ways that we can reduce our ecological footprint include consuming fewer resources or using existing resources more efficiently through technological innovations, energy efficiency, and recycling. Now, if you would like, I do actually have a little link right here to a survey where you can calculate your own footprint. Now, I've already done this survey. Just answer the questions as best as you can. Some of them are a little difficult. And my Earth overshoot day is April 30th. So I feel like I live fairly sustainably. I drive a very small car that I only drive about 30 kilometers, well, 40 kilometers a day. I eat fairly well with local food. However, I'm still not even making it to half of the year before I've used up all of my, you could say, year's allotment of energy. So I really encourage you, take a look at this, answer the survey questions, and see what your Earth overshoot day is. And tomorrow we'll be back with learning a little bit more about carrying capacity and how to graph it. All right. Hope you're having a great day, everybody. And please let me know if you have any questions.